Thank you everyone for coming to the front, and a very good evening to all of you. I know it's the fag end of the day, but we'll try and make it interesting and valuable to all of you today. We have a great session lined up. As you know, the topic is around the fact that platforms are really important in today's economy, and you will see companies of all sizes and shapes really picking up the trend of transforming towards platform-led businesses. And from that standpoint, we want to discuss how important the developer community is for the sustained growth, and first of all, creation, then sustained growth, and overall continuity and adoption of the platform. And we have a great set of panelists lined up. Thank you, Ajay, Karthik, Nikhil, and Vivek for joining us today. I'll probably allow the next minute or so in the panel itself to maybe quickly introduce yourself. Nikhil, do you want to start?
Hi, my name is Nikhil. I work as a fellow at iSPIRT Foundation. We are a not-for-profit. And I've been mostly focused on helping entrepreneurs and developers build on what's called as the India Stack, which enables a lot of APIs like Aadhaar, Digital Locker, UPI, and GST, and so on. Would love to share my experiences with you guys.
Hey, hi, I'm Vivek Prakash. I studied computer science, graduated about 5 years back, and started HackerEarth just after that. Today, we have close to 2 million developers on HackerEarth, and about 500, 600 odd companies so far. They have used HackerEarth to run different kind of innovation campaigns, hackathons, different kind of programs to engage with the developer community. And today, we have a very good presence in US, Europe, and India. In India itself, we have close to 1.5 million developers itself.
Hi guys, I'm Ajay Chebbi. I'm a senior technical staff member, which is a long name for a lead architect. I am responsible for IBM Cloud's mobile developer experience, all the mobile capabilities on IBM Cloud.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajay. Hi folks, my name is Karthik Padmanabhan. I'm part of the Google Developer Relations team, working with the developer and the startup ecosystem in India. On trying to see how we can help monetize this next billion user opportunity for both developers and startups. A little bit like what Nikhil is trying to do from an iSPIRT perspective. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. I think the most unique thing about the panelists that are a part of this panel today is the fact that we have representation from so many different facets of the ecosystem. We have organizations whom we, in our Zinnov parlance, call digital natives, and there are organizations which are working on the government side, that aspect of platforms. We have a company which is relatively newer, and they're trying to create a market, a different space altogether. And then we also have a company which is older than many of us here in the room, right? So I'm hoping the next 30-40 minutes are pretty interesting in the sense that how are these individual perspectives shaping up in terms of how important the developer community is to the platform economy and so on and so forth. So just to begin, I think the most important thing is how important really platforms are. So just to give you a sense, the top 5 platform companies today globally have a market capitalization of over $3.5 trillion. That's trillion, not billions or millions, right? So that's the kind of scale that we are looking at if we think about how important platforms are today. And platforms do so many different things. They allow you to tap into the power of networks. They allow you to scale exponentially. They leverage technology in various forms and shapes and so on and so forth, right? And it's not really something which is only centric to, as I said earlier, the digital natives, right? Companies from all across the industrial ecosystem, from various different verticals, you would see that they have their own approaches towards creating a platform-led business to really sort of derive the values that I spoke about earlier. And from that standpoint, I think it is worth exploring, first of all, how important the developer community is to begin with. So maybe that's the first question that I would pose to the panel here. In your respective opinions, in the walks of life that you sort of come from, how important is the community of developers to the field that you represent today? Karthik, you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah, thanks. So most of Google's platforms is built keeping the user in mind, but the user will not be able to enjoy the benefits of the platform if developers are not using the platform and building products or services relevant for users. So they for us, like developers are the honeybees. Okay, they pollinate the whole thing, and that's how the platforms grow. If you don't have honeybees, you'll not have a vibrant ecosystem of agriculture and flowering that's happening, right? So just imagine a situation where there's no bees around, so there's no pollination happening. So developers are the ones which are basically using the platform and making sure that the platform is of some relevance to somebody. And the relevance to somebody is users in our case. So from that perspective, it's super critical for us. And so we have an entire organization right across. We have a senior VP who runs the developer platform group, and then we have a hierarchy of people which I'm part of, and then we get paid to engage with developers, help developers through communities and things like that, so that they're able to keep abreast with what's happening on the technology front. And also, most importantly, we also get a lot of feedback from developers in terms of what they're finding good, and more importantly, what sucks, so that we're able to give that feedback to the product teams, and they're able to work on it in a much more efficient manner. So today, there's a lot of other platforms like Stack Overflow and GitHub and things like that, which helps people like us who are building products get first-hand information from developers in terms of what is helping, what is not helping. Without this way of having a two-way communication, you can't make platforms richer. Like a platform keeps getting richer and richer based on how much it's being used by developers and how you're engaging with developers and how you're able to act on those feedback from the developers.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I bring a different perspective, right? I'm the young man from a 105-year-old company. So IBM started, way long back, and then there was a time not too long ago when all the companies in that time frame, like Oracle, like Microsoft, we used to ship, you had to come buy the software first, then we'll ship the CDs to you. I think half the people will not even relate to this concept. And then along with it, we would ship a set of books to you. That was the documentation. And then the developers got to know, oh, this is a product I'm supposed to learn and work on. Right? Now, fast forward to today, IBM has turned itself inside out. So the quantum computer that recently announcement, if you have seen or know, one of the first things IBM did was make that API available on IBM Cloud so that developers can use it. We may have invented the quantum computer, but I think we may not be the only people who can define how to use it. Right. It's the developer ecosystem, like what Karthik was mentioning. It's the bees bringing the honey back and then in turn pollinating the fields to create more flowers.
Makes sense, actually.
That is what we are trying to do. An age-old company is trying to turn itself inside out and appeal to developers first. And then if developers love it, they like it, they will go tell their bosses to say, this is the stuff we need to buy, which is not the other way around, which was not too long ago.
Right. And that's a very interesting part. I'll probably later bring it up once again, because it's very interesting to understand what has brought about that change in an organization that old to this very different mentality and mindset that you carry today.
Yeah.
So if you look at the platforms today, and the definition of platforms have also changed over time. Today the platforms are inherently those which are very infrastructure oriented or very, very technical in nature. They require inherently developers to build applications on top of it to further grow the ecosystem. It dates as far as, or as back as when the Windows came to this world. If the Windows API was not open to the developers, there would not have been so many Windows apps, and the Windows would not have been what we see today. The same applies to, there are countless examples. The same applies to the Apple iOS App Store. Today, there are close to 2 million apps on it. developers have earned over $100 billion on top of those 2 million apps. There have been over 100 billion downloads. And it's a very wonderful example of how a company transformed itself by building building a platform on which developers could build apps, further growing the ecosystem. And the same story goes on and on. And one of the things that is very, at the core of it is because software is eating the world. So all the businesses are trying to become more and more, obviously, technology oriented. At the same time, they want to leverage the power of the platforms, without which the fear that there will be those incumbent businesses and they will not be able to compete with the new age companies. And that's the trend that we are particularly seeing today.
Sure. I kind of have a mixed opinion. I've built desktop software, sold cloud, built APIs, and now working on policies as APIs. I think when we think about digital, it's inherent that there is going to be a developer behind that product, right? So the community is important. So as far as we're going digital, the community is going to be far and more important. So you can't take away that. Somebody has to write code. So all that we can make sure is this guy writing good code or bad code. So you'll typically see people who are part of communities end up writing good code. And a lot of standalone applications which have been written by different software companies. I used to kid, like in India, if you turn around in every road, there's one software company, right? So we have been a developer nation for a long time. This has been going around. But the role of community comes in terms of like, how do you improve software? How do you build better code? So you have many supporting infrastructure that comes up. For example, AWS, IBM, Google Cloud, et cetera, kind of give you the cloud infrastructure. But the primary role of a developer is at the end of the day to solve a problem, right? Any code that is written without a purpose is useless code, right? So the role of a developer is to basically solve a problem. Then you have a choice whether to solve this problem for yourself, you solve it for an institution, or you build a business on top of it. From that perspective, I think all of these days, most of the developers have been focused on, or platforms have been built to allow people to build businesses on top of it. If you take about any of the cloud infrastructure companies, their own goal is, so for example, for AWS, it doesn't matter whether Freshdesk wins or Zendesk wins, because both of them are built on top of AWS. As far as they're going and acquiring customers, they win as a platform. So which is why the 4 trillion or 5 trillion is not happening inside the platform, but outside. And why do you need to build these public good platforms? Is to solve really hard problems, say financial inclusion, health inclusion, and so on and so forth. So one of the best examples for me personally has been in this journey is seeing Nitin Kamath range from being an unemployed BPO worker to probably the most valuable fintech company in India. I don't know if you guys know his numbers, but the kind of profits he posts is probably the amount of money that a lot of startups are still trying to raise. So he is a developer who's built on top of these India Stack APIs and has been able to solve a problem X for this. And we expect similar products to be built for various different segments and so on and so forth. So I think the role of the developer is more and more important. I mean, there is no denying the fact that the developer is going to be at the center of this new digital economy that we are moving towards.
Right. No, absolutely. I think I kind of agree with it. But I have a slightly different question as well. Is the developer community, not necessarily the developer himself, but the community at large, is it equally important for all kinds of platforms? So if you look at the larger platform economy in general, right? You have companies like you spoke about, AWS or Microsoft. They have a certain type of platforms where consumption for them is driven by the number of apps which are on the ecosystem, and then further how they are consumed, right? And then there are other platforms as well. A company like Schneider or Honeywell today, they will create platforms which are more relevant to their set of products that they create. And then at the end of it, necessarily the consumers are only the ones who are buying their products at the end of it. And the other extreme may be even e-commerce platforms, right, which are basically aggregators of both sellers and buyers, and they're bringing it together. Is it fair to say that the role of the developer community in general is not equally valid across all of these, and there are some types of platform businesses which have developer community literally at the center and they can't sustain without it, and there are others which probably can even do without it. Another example could be the aggregators like Olas and Ubers of the world. I'll be keen to know what's your view on whether they need the developer community at large for the sustained continuation of their business.
I'll probably take a dig and pass it on. I think see, if you actually think about why do you build communities, you're building communities to increase distribution of your platform, right? The more and more developers build on your platform, that means more and more people will build on top of your platform, which means you'll make more money on your platform. So if you think about it in a very traditional FMCG kind of a sense, you're just trying to basically, they're like the distributor network for you, right? So the community of, typically when you expect, let's say, a developer community around, let's say someone is building on Android, the expectation is that this Android developer goes to another company and then chooses the same kind of suite or product suite to build. Or, I'm using a certain infrastructure company, I go to a new company and I do this. So communities are very important to build network effects for a platform. So the same developer goes on to different institutions or different kind of problems using the same platform components.
Right.
So that is why community is really important.
So the network effects come.
And communities are also important for scale from a platform economy perspective. So earlier if you had like IBM's transformation would be like, there will be 100 sales guys in IBM who would probably be in different institutions trying to sell an enterprise class product maybe for $1 million, $2 million or things like that. But today the reverse approach is for you to build at scale, you can't be supporting each and every developer when he's writing code and so on. So which is why the community becomes important so that it's self-learning, you commit, you learn from each other, you use shared resources and so on. So the use of community, as you said, might be for different things, but primarily I see these two reasons why communities are important.
So yeah, Nikhil covered most of the things, and I'll probably just extend it by taking two examples. To take example of the Predix platform that GE, General Electric, is building, which is a application platform, for industrial IoT applications, something to monitor and assess the industrial operations. Then on the other hand, take example of platforms like, let's say, AWS or even Azure or even Elite Cloud, the platforms in the cloud space. And for all of them, maybe the size of the developer community would not be the same, but there has to be at least at least a threshold number of community for the network effect to kick in, for the trust for the developers that this platform is stable, or this platform is something I can invest my time in, I can build the apps, I can use the APIs, and all the organizations today, whatever platform they have in whatever industry, they try to at least grow the community to that, at least the bare minimum threshold. And from there, then the network effect, the trust, the economy, and the skill starts kicking in, and that's why that investment is very important. And I'm plugging in HackerEarth here. We have seen companies trying to do that with HackerEarth, exposing their APIs, exposing their platforms, the data sets, the different, even the in-house applications they have built on HackerEarth, so that the community can come together and build applications on top of it. And we have seen that time and again, even with IBM exposing Watson and Watson APIs, so that the developers could come and build applications on top of it.
Got it.
Yeah, so the realization that the product is not the end goal is what is fundamentally driving this change, right? The fact that I have an iPhone in itself, or you have an Android phone in itself, doesn't mean anything. What it brings to my life, right? The value of that, what I build on top of it if I'm a developer, is fundamentally the real change maker here.
So actually, Ajay, that's a very important point. So there is one aspect of these platforms catering to consumers directly, and there's another where many of these platforms are meant for businesses at the end of it. Do you see any difference in these two?
So taking the example of Watson, so Watson is IBM's AI platform, right. AI ML platform. The APIs are available on IBM Cloud. There was a hackathon, and a company put together a little toy. It's called Dino, which, anybody who has kids knows. The kid says, "Why is there a moon in the sky?" The next question is, "Why is it there? Why is it white? How far is it?" At one point, the parent wants to feed the curiosity, but is also almost incapable of answering those questions. How far is the moon? It's like, I have no idea. So they tried to solve that problem by using Watson, stuck that into a toy in the shape of a Dino. IBM is not in the business of building toys. But the developer ecosystem has built all these kind of unique end products. So Watson itself as a product is not an end. What developers build on top of it is what the real value that comes to people. In terms of enterprise developers that you were saying, so earlier, it was like developers stayed at a company for 25 years, and they just kept on using whatever products their bosses bought. That's not true anymore. Right? I think somebody in the, who's done more study about the industry can tell what is the average lifespan of an engineer. But I'm sure it's not more than 3 to 4 years. And then they carry that skill forward, and they become the ecosystem at large. So it's not the developer in Accenture or Wipro or Infosys. It's that entire community of all of them put together. And that is of value for product makers like me, that they are more enabled to solve their problems using my platform, my products. So that's where the whole transformation is happening.
Correct. So Karthik, let me ask you another question on this point. So I mean, it's pretty obvious that across the board, this is a common sentiment that the community is incredibly important. You can't do without it for various reasons, whether directly serving your business or in extension influencing the choices that people make, right? But with that background, since you do it literally for a living, give us a perspective on how difficult it has become to one, create and then manage these communities. What are the challenges that you would face on a daily basis, given the fact that the developers that you are trying to onboard and sustain on your platform, they have so many different choices today, not just the immediate choices that you would have against your immediate competitors, but in the sense that the overall technology ecosystem is so huge and there are so many different domains to sort of tap into. With all of this complexity that is out there, how difficult has it really become? What are the challenges that you would face today?
Yeah, so the challenges are a handful in case of building communities. So the biggest challenge is that people, it's not diverse. For innovation to happen, you need to have diversity. When I say diversity, you can see the diversity in this room, right? There are hardly any females, engineers or executives in this room, right? It's all male dominated.
Few of them would like to disagree, but that's fine.
So diversity is very, very important. Diversity in views, diversity in gender, diversity in culture. How do you inculcate in communities? How do you get everybody to share their point of view in communities? Communities is not about a race. It's not about Amazon versus Google versus IBM. If you have that mindset, then before the race starts itself, you lose. Communities is all about giving. It's all about sharing. It's all about collaborating. It's all about helping somebody else. It's not about what is in it for me. The moment you get into a community or build a community or participate in a community saying what is in it for me, the very high probability that the community will not last. Right. It will not flower, it will not become a tree. So which are the most successful communities on this planet Earth?
Religion?
Yeah.
I would imagine religion.
Stack Overflow?
Yeah, Stack Overflow. Like let's take a physical community where there's a lot of innovation happening. San Francisco area, Bay Area, a lot of innovation happens. And he's been there. Many of us have been there. And difference between that community and any other community is because people there are giving. They're always giving, they always have time, they always want to help. They're not typically in this mindset of what is in it for me, right? So when I'm building community on behalf of Google or anybody else for that matter, is that how do we work with community leaders? How do we inspire them? How do we motivate them to go out and do that? So why is the tech community in Bangalore so vibrant? And why is it not vibrant in Chennai? It's the same people, same Indians. So why is it that? Diversity. Bangalore is very diverse. Diversity in views, diversity in cultures, is very cosmopolitan. Okay, and that's the reason why innovation happens. So that becomes the fountainhead for innovation, right? So diversity is number one thing which you have to say. You have to create an environment for people to participate. It's not about judging or being good or being wrong. It's about everybody needs to feel that, hey, he's wanted. So in a community, even that 1% contribution versus somebody giving 80% contribution is the same. You can't judge things. So that's one of the big challenges of how do we build communities, right? So I keep getting, say, oh, boss, I want a Bangalore in Vizag. Hey, Google, I want a Bangalore like in Vizag. So we get calls like this, and some sales guy will say, hey, Karthik Padmanabhan will come and do a magic wand, and then Vizag will become Bangalore. Unfortunately, it's not possible. You can't build community overnight, right? It takes a lot of work. It's amorphous. It's like you can't find a head in a community. The moment you see a head in the community, that other community won't last. It's not a community. It's not a community. Community is it just crumbs up like that. So heads come, heads go, but it goes. So these are some of the physical, philosophical kind of challenges which we typically face in building communities. But having said that, we've grown a lot in the last 5-6 years in India, thanks to IBM and Amazon and Microsoft and Google, because a lot of us are doing work selflessly in the community. It's not about their product versus our product, because I see, there could be an Amazon meetup. They'll invite Google. A lot of Google, when I was in IBM, a lot of Google community used to invite IBM to talk about Watson and Bluemix. It's all about sharing. It's not about, hey, I'm an Amazon community, I just need to run Amazon meetups. It's not like that. People say, is there something good? Let me learn. So it's like this, right? So there are so many gardens. I mean, it doesn't matter which garden, what flower comes. As far as flowers are beautiful, people will always go pick up, right? So the idea is to make sure that you build good gardens where you have good flowers. So that's all.
I had a quick... I had a quick point on the diversity, another viewpoint on the diversity angle, right? I think I'm probably giving away my age. So when I was growing up, the ability or just the fact that I was working in a company that had access to a mainframe made me sort of an elite, right? Because he would be working in a company that doesn't have access to the mainframe. Just the fact that my company has bought this capability, this software, that hardware, and I am allowed to work on it, was itself my qualification. Now, with platforms, that whole thing is democratized. Now, I don't need to have access to Watson or any other software, if you say. Android, for example, right? The Android OS. I can just go to YouTube, which is another learning platform, look up a bunch of tutorials, and now I am able to face the same interview that maybe somebody in Google is working on Android can, right? Because the source code is open. Again, another wonderful community called GitHub. You have tutorials and education material on another wonderful community called YouTube. And all the other blogging sites. So it's not limited to only those privileged few who had the access to that software and hardware. Now it is everybody's game. It's game on, as they say, right? And that is bringing a sea change in the kind of stuff that is produced. Even an average grade programmer, just because he landed in a job that had a mainframe terminal, would be in demand. That's not the case anymore.
Got it. So I've just been given the cue on time, but let me ask two important questions I wanted to cover. One, at an overall level across the four of you, give us a few inputs on what are some of the best practices that you guys have seen in terms of creating and nurturing communities. I think that's really important. Second, and maybe you can go after the first round is done, but what would be your advice to the larger developer community in terms of choices they make and how they go about it? And do keep in mind that the future developer community is still in universities and colleges right now, right? So what would be your message across to them?
Maybe I'll start sequentially. So I think, yeah, in my opinion, all platform businesses by design which serve communities or developers are B2B. There can never be a B2C platform. It can be a marketplace. Like Facebook, I would call it as a content marketplace, but it's not a platform. But it's a platform for advertising, businesses to advertise. Sure. So all platforms by design are B2B. And the only customer is the developer. So unless and until a platform company decides and says, the developer is my customer, you truly have not become a platform company. You're only skirting around between trying to be from product to, you know, you're in somewhere lost in between the digital transformation process. So you become truly a platform company the day you make the developer your customer. So what does that experience look like? How does the developer find me online? What does he see reviews on? Probably he doesn't go to Zomato or some other place to check some stuff. He's on Stack Overflow seeing what people have commented against this particular code. So what is my online reputation? What does he see when he comes to my website? Is there clear pricing for him? Should I even charge him? Should I give him a great onboarding experience? What are the first few screens that he see? You start seeing the developer as a consumer, and only then you will become successful as a, in building communities and so on. And especially platforms, if you look at all great platforms, whether it's IBM, AWS, Google, Android Studio, all of them have focused on developer as a consumer and not developer as a business.
It's a fantastic point. I think experience of the developer himself and treat him like a customer and put him in the middle of it. It's a great point. So, Ajay?
So I have been fortunate enough to be in college not very long back, and then build a lot of applications, get involved with a lot of platforms, got exposed to GitHub, Google Cloud, AWS, all of that in the college, participated in hackathons, which further exposed me to all of it. And one thing that I realized when I was in college, and after that when we built HackerEarth, and in the last 5 years that we have been building HackerEarth, that you cannot build a community overnight. It takes time to build a community, to nurture it. That's the number one. Takes at least 5-6 years for any kind of platform to start seeing some kind of traction. The second is platform companies. The biggest of the platform companies that we see today, they have obviously taken their time to grow the community, but at the same time they have realized that they cannot go heavy on monetization from the day one. You have to give time so that the developers become aware of the platform itself, the APIs, the kind of applications that can be built on top of it, have a as list invasive model as possible in the beginning to start with, so that for the developers it's almost free or completely free to do the experiments that they want to do with. That's the reason that because of which we see free tiers, and even to an extent you can use products like, let's say, AWS. The developers can get started without paying any money. That's the number two. And the number three is the platforms which grow, they invest very heavily in the knowledge base which is available to the developers. They invest very, very heavily in it. In the beginning, a lot of it has to be seeded. Over the time, the developer, the community itself comes together and it starts producing a lot of knowledge base. But if that knowledge base is not very strong, the growth of the platform is hindered a lot. So these three things are very, very essential, and it takes time to do all of that. Obviously, it takes at least half a decade to start seeing any kind of good traction.
Thanks.
Yeah, true. So here is a one little secret, right? Which is developer is now making buying decisions. Developers in large companies are influencing decisions. Somebody goes out, builds a little something on one of the platforms, and then shows it to the boss. And they say, this is ready. You just need to buy more credits and just put it in production. Right? This is what it has enabled. So developer is indeed in the center of, it's not the purchaser, the guy who used to write the check anymore. It's more of the developer who's building stuff.
He's influencing the decisions.
He's influencing heavily the decisions. And in terms of community building, so here's an interesting thing. The interesting thing of Kubernetes, for example, of which IBM and Google both are members of the community, and they both have competing offerings, and they both participate in Kubernetes conferences, hackathons. community evangelizing, enabling developers on Kubernetes. It's not with the intention that they will come only, if I go and say, no, they should only come to IBM, they may learn and go to Google or AWS, and that's fine, right? So that's why you have all sorts of, which used to be heavily competing forces before, coming and doing a selfless investment in enabling the developer to do the right thing.
Sure. So quickly, so just to give the importance of developers in India, right? So as per the latest Stack Overflow report 2018, all of you are free to take a look at the Stack Overflow 2018 report. Approximately professional developer count, like real data, of people who have gone and reached Stack Overflow is around 21 million. Out of that, 14% is from India. That puts us as 3 million developers. And we are the second biggest developer nation on this planet, after the US and North America, right? And so it's real. So we should not be sitting here on a panel trying to discuss are developers important any longer, because the data is out there. It's huge out there. And 3 million developers as per Stack Overflow is approximately what is it in India. So from a Google standpoint, how are we working on this? Right? We've been working with this developers for last 7-8 years now. Google is an 18-year-old company, and 7-8 years, we serious investment. And my boss's boss has been in this developer business for the last 10 years in Google. Right. And so one of the main things what we have learned is that you have to get your best stuff as open source. Your best invention which you have done has to be open source. So we started with Android. We bought the company, we open sourced it. And you know what has happened to Android today. We created TensorFlow because Google pivoted as a mobile first to an AI first company, and we got TensorFlow. And 2 years back, 3 years back, we open sourced TensorFlow. Kubernetes is the way Google's search engine works. It's an 18-year-old technology which we have built on the whole search engine. That got open sourced 3 or 4 years back. Right. And then once you open source the best stuff, it's like you give the best stuff, what happens? Honeybees come around that. And then they pollinate and make it bigger, better. Already it's good, it gets better, better, better. So you need to have a mindset for a company to, if you are an innovating company, you need to open source it, get more people. Because if you become very protective of it, your IP will probably stagnate after a point.
Fantastic. I think this is really wonderful. A few gems from here. How do you really go about cross-pollinating the IP that you've created and create a community around it? Selfless investment, as you spoke about, putting the developer in the larger form of a customer and putting him in the middle. I think fantastic points. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing this. I think you can probably take 1 or 2 questions. Anybody from the audience? Any questions?
You know, while somebody asks a question, just to your point on advice to developers on what to give away, I think one thing I just wanted to leave, you know, this whole talk was supposed to be around community, and you know, hopefully we've stressed on the importance of community. If you're a developer, please be a part of a community. Building standalone software inside an organization is not good enough anymore to be a developer. And I'd like to leave with the Andy Grove quote, which is very famous: only the paranoid survive. There is software being built to build software. So you might well just be on top of it on what's happening, and the only way for you to quickly learn what's happening around is to build a community or be part of a community.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. I think we'll call it a day now. Hopefully some good gems came out of it, and you know, people here will take those away from here. Thank you so much once again.